The Draft Professor Simulator features a first-round challenge, 5 unique one-round drafts. The Draft Professor Simulator features a second-round challenge, 10 unique 2-round drafts. All mock drafts are always picking against the fans and draft analysts which use the simulator. Every mock, every pick, every time. The Draft Professor also features ranked players functionality, where you can rank your favorite players at every position. Optionally, you can add tiers to your rankings to show what round you have the players graded in. The Draft Professor also features Draft a Team functionality, which allows users to snake draft a team of 22 players to demonstrate your my guys, compare player strengths, and discuss draft prospects in a way no other mock draft simulator can. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Well, good morning and welcome to the Saturday edition of Mrs. R Relevant. As usual, I am joined with Brian and Anthony. Brian, good morning.
Good morning, guys. How's it going?
Going pretty good. So this is you coming back from work and you've been awake for a while, right, Brian?
No, actually, I was off last night because I work every other Friday night. So
got it. Okay. And Anthony, was it as late of a night for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good morning. I definitely slept very soundly once I actually went to sleep. But last night was a very fun time. Props to Bill and Dale, who put on a pretty damn good show hosting the mock draft, and some picks were some interesting picks.
So I would definitely say that was first class entertainment. I know that whenever I work with Dale or whenever I work with Bill, the fact that Bill and Dale had never met prior to that podcast, those guys nailed it. So if you have 3 hours, if you're listening to this podcast and you have 3 hours, listen to the 32 GM mock draft that we did last night, because you're going to hear some really good commentary on the top 100 players. From two people I have a lot of respect for. I've worked with Bill Carroll for close to 3 years at this point, I think. And if you ever just have a chance to sit down and talk with him, the stories just keep going. So it's definitely, that was first class entertainment last night. I was up very late after that, but good morning. Welcome to the Saturday morning edition. And I think we're going to go through a 33rd team mock draft and just kind of talk about it and maybe what some of our opinions are of it. So, I guess Kyle has Cam Ward going first overall. So I guess I think the first question is, like, Brian, how high is Cam Ward on your board?
He's up there. I mean, like, it's one of those weird things with quarterbacks. Because of the positional value they always get pushed up. Without taking the positions into account, he's probably like 15-ish around there for me. But the positional value, the upside, stuff like that, he's like a top 5 pick. So. It makes sense.
Yep. And Anthony, how about you? How high is Ward on your board?
Yeah, so Ward is 30 for me, which does not count for like positional value or anything like that. But just talking about the pick as a pick, it makes all the sense in the world. If you're gonna take a quarterback, I think it's Cam Ward, and the Titans can't rely on Will Levis to be their quarterback. And that certainly could open up other, trades or free agent scenarios. And I do love Abdul Carter, who I'm sure we'll talk about shortly. So it certainly makes sense to pick him. But the Cam Ward pick is a logical choice. If any QB is going to go first overall, it should be him, in my opinion.
Yep.
Yeah. And my opinion is that if you are a new head coach, which Brian Callahan is in year 2, you take a quarterback early in your coaching tenure. If you're a new coach and you don't draft a quarterback in your first 2 years, unless you're inheriting an all-pro, I don't see that like as a recipe for success. And I will make that comment as we move through a few of the other picks here in this draft. Next pick was Abdul Carter to Cleveland.
Yep.
So where's Abdul Carter on your boards?
Number 1.
Number 2, but I mean, probably a similar sentiment.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I just feel like Abdul he's certainly the best edge player by a mile. I think that's pretty consensus.
Yeah.
And if you're Cleveland, the roster is just a mess all over the place, and that's before trading Myles Garrett, if that happens. So just get a franchise player, a guy that can become the face of your team if Myles Garrett leaves. Immediate impact player, all pro potential. I mean, yeah, I think it makes all the sense in the world, especially if you're not sold on Shador, or if Cam Ward was here, or any of the other quarterbacks, whatever.
Right.
Just go get a dynamite player to put on your football team, and you can worry about quarterback in some other, whether it be free agency or whatever. You can address it elsewhere.
Next year.
Yep.
And then number 3 is Shedeur Sanders to the Giants. So how high do you guys have Sanders in your boards?
I gotta scroll a bit.
Again, like I said, with the quarterback positional stuff, not accounting for position, he's probably like 25, something like that for me. But accounting for position, he's like probably 20. I mean, not that much higher. Just because, with Shedeur, like the upside's not as super high as it is with Ward. He's just going to be a solid type guy. A lot of people have given him the Geno comp, or they've given him the Teddy Bridgewater comp, which I think fits as far as like his upside and stuff like that. So I don't agree with the pick. I would probably rather take Hunter at that spot, but yeah, so I think it's a little bit of a reach.
It kind of sucks. I was just gonna say, it kind of sucks if you're the Giants, because I think they're the most like backed into a corner in terms of quarterback, but this also goes. I have Shedeur Sanders at 76 on my board, which I know puts me in a minority, but it's a tough, because yeah, I don't know. I can't sit here and say I would take Shedeur in the first round, but I get it if you're the Giants, because like they have to get a quarterback. They have to. And so if you don't get, I've seen the Matt Stafford trade rumors. There's talk of maybe if Aaron Rodgers wants to stay in the New York, New Jersey area, but yeah, tough spot for the Giants here.
So this is one where I definitely question it. So first, Anthony, you may be in the minority, but you're not the only one that has Sanders that low. Josh didn't even have him in his top 100.
Yeah, I mean, I get it.
He had 3 quarterbacks ahead of Sanders in addition to Ward.
Not surprising.
Kind of thing. So, and if anybody listening is interested, Josh did a podcast last Monday on his top 100, all offensive players in his top 100. He had 4 quarterbacks in his top 100, but none of them were named Shedeur Sanders. And that's where I question this pick for the Giants, because Dable is coaching for his job. He may not even make it through the year.
Probably won't.
There's almost no way that you risk that on a rookie quarterback. If your job security is that volatile, you're going to need to sign a veteran who's going to be able to play all 17 games. That's my opinion. I don't think Dable could risk Shedeur Sanders as his quarterback.
I do think, though, as a very slight pushback, because I agree that I wouldn't make this pick, but Shador is probably the most quote unquote pro ready quarterback. Like Cam Ward, as much as I think he is QB1, and I actually think he would probably fit Daboll better than Shador would. He needs a little more seasoning, so to speak. Whereas what Shador brings to the table will be brought to the table like week one. If I presume he'll be starting week one wherever he winds up.
Right.
But like, it's not going to take time to like fix the hero ball that Cam Ward does and some of the more questionable decisions that Cam Ward makes. Like, Shador's going to come in, have the mental part of it pretty much down. It really is just going to come down to what I think are, serious physical and athletic limitations. So I get it from like that perspective, but yeah, I mean, I'm with you guys. Like, I don't make this pick here, and the hope is that the Giants have found somebody who can start 17 games and potentially win like 9 or 10 of them to save Daboll's job.
Yeah.
Mitch, and there's also the thought that Daboll can kind of sell the ownership and GM or whatever on keeping around for another year because, hey, look, I got this rookie quarterback. He's got this potential. Just give us another couple of years, whatever, blah blah blah. So
I do see that, Brian. Like if the owner, but like this is where does the owner let the coach draft a quarterback or does the coach, right? Because unless the owner signed off on that almost ahead of the pick, I don't know if the risk is worth the reward because, like, I thought Daboll's coaching job, his first season with the Giants, was among the best. Right? I mean, he took a Daniel Jones team to the playoffs.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, the next pick is Mason Graham to the Patriots. So, Anthony, what do you think of that pick?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense from a value standpoint. Graham is third on my board, so it makes sense there. Patriots is definitely going to want to beef up both sides of the trenches. Mason Graham's the best one to do it on defense. I don't think the offensive line need that is abundantly a need for the Patriots it's not met by the talent that's here. There's no offensive lineman I take it for. So then for me, it comes down to either Graham or Teteroa McMillan. And I think I think wide receiver is a bigger need, help out May, but I do think Graham is the better player. So I think this pick is very logical. I would support it if I was a Patriots fan, and worry about getting the offensive pieces that you need on day 2.
So Brian, what do you think of Mason Graham?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of been like a consensus pick almost kind of for New England. Most of the box I see, he's good. It's usually him going to New England. But just usually a lot of them, it's Travis Hunter going before him. And so that makes 100% sense. So, I mean, I could even see Hunter. I mean, I know they have Gonzo and stuff like that, but like, Hunter's obviously a very special player as well. But yeah, I mean, Graham fits too. I mean, even though, he fits as far as like what New England needs. And like Anthony said, there's no offensive tackle worth this pick. Yeah, the only other player I think would be worth this pick with the draft working out this way would be Hunter. But yeah, so I think either way is fine, either him or Hunter.
Okay. And then the next pick was Travis Hunter to the Jaguars, which is almost predictable if he falls that far.
Right.
So any additional thoughts on Travis Hunter to the Jaguars? I mean, that fits pretty much like a glove.
Yeah. I mean, especially with the way this draft, this first 4 picks fell. I mean, he's the the next best player, and then there's like a big gap between him and the next player. So I mean, that's as they say, you run the card up type of pick. So it's basically a steal for Jacksonville. They can obviously play him a corner and then set him up some packages on offense with some wide receiver plays, maybe 10 plays a game or something like that. So, that pick definitely makes sense.
Okay. And Anthony, anything to say on Hunter or Ashton Jeanty, the next pick to the Raiders?
Yeah, well, so for Hunter, Hunter is number one on my board. I still think he's the best football player in this entire class, and probably as a majority corner with a little wide receiver sprinkles thrown in. But I like him a lot for the Jaguars, who very much need a corner. And yeah, he fits the bill. I think one of the things that, and this kind of also goes into the Jeanty pick, I think one of the things that it probably shouldn't matter in some ways, but I think it should in others, and it does to teams, is when you're picking this high, you're picking a player that you can sell to your fans as like the face of the franchise. And to me, Travis Hunter is the most like face of the franchise player in this draft in terms of just what he brings to you in terms of his football acumen and his ability and his personality. He's been very much in the spotlight in his time at Colorado. He was the number one overall recruit out of high school. He has been known to the football world for years now. And for a team like Jacksonville, who doesn't often get, true, I don't want to say celebrities, but like true faces of the league to come to their team. If you now have a Travis Hunter, who we all know is talented, and, you have a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., who I think can emerge as a top receiver. If you're able to sell yourself more, you're going to attract free agents. You're going to more high profile players and coaches are going to want to work with you. And and then, you're going to get more fans and whatever. So I do think that is a part of this that doesn't get talked about enough. And Travis Hunter to me just would be so welcome and so invigorating for Jaguars fans and their football team as a whole. And similar to that, Jeanty to the Raiders, I'm a big fan of the pick. It fits the identity that Pete Carroll is going to want to build, run the football, win with toughness and physicality. And then he's just so talented. Obviously, the Raiders running back room was a mess last year, so it fills a big need. They are another one you have to wonder what the quarterback situation is going to be, but you're obviously not getting Cam or Shedeur in this scenario. So take the best offensive player, and they're certainly a team that I think could be in the veteran bridge, whatever market as well that there is. So, but just having Jeanty and Brock Bowers on the same offense is just great, regardless of whatever else is happening.
So, Brian, what do you think of Jeanty going this high?
I think it's a better reach. I mean, I love Jeanty. He's been one of my guys since 2023 when he was sharing the backfield with George Holani, but and Boise State, of course. But he's still a running back, and he's not Bijan. Again, I love him, but like I wouldn't take him at 6. And Vegas, I feel like Vegas has more needs, more important needs, I guess I should say. And it's a really good running back class. They could, with their other needs, they could wait to take a running back a little bit later. I think Will Johnson probably makes more sense to me. I think he's he's higher on my board as well too. But I think Will Johnson would be a better pick and would make more sense than Jeanty for me.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I would not take a running back in the top 10 if my roster was in the shape of the Raiders. Just positional importance. I'd want to make sure I have edge defensive tackle, offensive line, straightened out. And then after that, wide receiver and corner, right after that. Like, I just can't see when your roster is in the shape that it's in, the Raiders need every premium position they can add. And I don't consider running back to be the premium position. Like, unless you're looking at like a Saquon Barkley here. And I don't know that Genty is in that stratosphere. So my opinion is that this specific pick was 33rd team's clickbait. They know everybody's going to talk about it. So 7, Will Johnson to the Jets. So Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings. I think Will Johnson is very good. He is 6th on my board. So in that sense, I don't mind it. I feel like there's other players I'd prefer here at bigger positions of need, in my opinion. And corner is a need. I don't think that I don't want to say Jets fans don't know that, because I think they do. But, DJ Reed is probably gone. He's a free agent, and I don't think the Jets are going to pony up what he's going to want contract-wise. Sauce had a down year. I don't think I'm not worried about Sauce still being CB1 going forward. But you do need another corner opposite him. And I think Will Johnson's very talented. The medicals are a question. But assuming that gets sorted out, I don't mind him being taken here. Would I rather have had Tetero McMillan here? Yeah. Would I rather have had, I think Tyler Warren versus Will Johnson is a conversation to be had. Would I rather, I have somebody else we'll talk about later. It's growing on me that Kenneth Grant could be an option here if he has the kind of combine that I think he could have, and a lot of people think he could have, because interior D-line is probably the biggest need on this team, or at least one of two, depending on what happens at quarterback. But I'm certainly not advocating take a QB here. But yeah, so I'm not mad at Will Johnson. I think there are better options here for the Jets.
So Brian, how high do you have T-Mac on your board?
I'm trying to think. He's like bottom of the first, early second, I think.
Yeah. So this is an interesting discussion, because I know I listen to Kyle Krabs every day. Right. That's the one podcast that I listen to. I listen to Locked On Scouting every day. I catch other draft content, but Joe Marino, Kyle Krabs is a must listen for me. I know Kyle does not have T-Mac high enough to go here. So it's interesting, right? Because even in the 32 GM mock that we did yesterday, the two people, Dale and Bill, were surprised that Golden and Egbuka went higher than Burden. But that's what I'm hearing. As I'm looking around and seeing where do people have the different receivers on their board. To me, there's a world where Egbuka and Golden go before T-Mac and Burden. So I don't know that everybody has T-Mac high enough to go here.
I think the case for T-Mac is there, in my opinion, there's truly no receiver like him in this draft, in the sense of you're getting a guy who's 6'5",
6'4",
or 6'4", 215, or I forget the official numbers, but
right,
along those lines, and the size and the wide receiver one ceiling that he has in terms of what he brings to an offense, I don't think anybody else has that. But there seems to be a sentiment growing that T-Mac is not a top 10 player, which I think for a while a lot of people thought that. Daniel Jeremiah had a mock a few, I think it was last week or a few days ago, whatever. I lose track of time, but he had him going 19 to Tampa, which a lot of people initially were like, whoa, like, is there a problem with T-Mac that we don't know about? Like, does he have like an off field? Did he rob a bank or something that we don't know about? But like, no, it's just not everyone is like, oh man, this is like a surefire wide receiver one. And there are other good receivers that people are growing, their love of Matthew Golden and Egbuka, and there are very much still Luther Burden truthers out there, Bill Sparks being one of the biggest. So, it's an interesting wide receiver class. A lot of it probably also comes down to just what your team needs at wide receiver. But I wouldn't be stunned if T-Mac's weird. I wouldn't be stunned if he falls out of the top 15. I also wouldn't be stunned if he goes 4 to New England.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. So the next player was at 8 was Mike Green to Carolina. So Brian, any thoughts on Mike Green to Carolina?
Yeah, like it's interesting. Like I kind of feel like with Mike Green, I kind of feel like similar to what Corey Kinnan was saying yesterday, where there's always these guys that you like coming in, and then like they get some hype and it builds and builds and builds and builds, and then it gets so high where you're like, I'm out on like that high. So like Mike Green's kind of that one of those guys with me, like him and some other guys, but he's one like that on him as well. I like him a lot. I liked him a lot, even actually last year when he had he was kind of a backup for Marshall last year, but he played a lot. And he really flashed on film last year too. But this year, of course, he took it to another level. And I like him a lot too, like I said. But at 8, I don't know about that. His arms are a little short. His run defense isn't that great. I mean, he obviously just has talent upside and can be able to get better. His potential off-field issues, of course, that too is kind of looming in the background. So it's, I just don't think he's worth the top 8 pick. I think if his background stuff comes clean or, comes back as everything's okay or whatever, around like 15, I think I'd be okay with 15 to 20 around that range. But, at 8, I think that's just a little too high for my liking.
Anthony, what do you think of Green at 8?
Yeah, similar sentiment to Brian. He's 25 on my board, so this is a little bit of a reach for me, especially given other edge players on the board right now. I don't hate it, and there's certainly a lot to like about Mike Green. I don't think anyone has the clear picture of the off-field questions that we would want at this point. But even if you put that aside and look at just the player, I still think there are some concerns about just him being a true 3-down difference maker against NFL offensive lines. I like the pick, but again, there's other edge people that I would be taking here at 8.
Okay, so at number 9, it was Shamar Stewart to the Saints. So Anthony, what do you think of that?
Yeah, so Shamar Stewart is one of those people that I was talking about. Man, he's another one. Obviously, very divisive as a prospect, but I just can't help but just look at him and just see the physical tools, the freakish athleticism, and all of the stuff that he brings. The speed to power is insane. All of it is just such it gives you such a foundation to work with that if you give him the right coaching and environment to develop, because he needs it, and he needs to develop his pass rush moves. I don't dispute that, but there's a floor there in my mind. He also is a very quality run defender in my opinion. So he gives you that floor, and then the ceiling is just so high that I don't think he can reasonably fall out of the top 15 because of it. especially in a class that lacks true star power at the top compared to most classes. I think when you have a guy whose ceiling is as high as I believe Shamar's is, you have to take him around in this range. And for the Saints, I like it a lot. It's very much he's very much a player that they would take in terms of his physical profile and who they like to have on the defensive line. I don't know exactly what Kellen Moore is going to want to do for the defense, but it's a very Saintsy pick, and it also gives him, Cam Jordan. I don't know if he's going to be back next year, but Cam Jordan is the kind of guy that like could teach him, could be a mentor that he needs. So I like that kind of fit as well. But in terms of value, yeah, I think this is a great pick for the Saints.
And Brian, what do you think of Shamar Stewart at 9 to the Saints?
I kind of go a little, I don't know if I'd say opposite, but different than Anthony here. Like all that stuff he said is pretty much true. I mean, the upside, the talent, all that stuff with Stewart, and he kind of fits that the type of defensive lineman that they generally draft. They generally like the bigger guys. But he's just one of the guys I'm really conflicted on. Like I said, the talent and upside's there, but just like the lack of production just really worries me. There's a history of guys who have had a lack of production in college and gone to the NFL and been really good pass rushers, like Danielle Hunter, for example. But they're kind of the exception, not the rule. Usually the guys that lack production in college don't really magically produce, 15, 20, whatever sacks, become those type of guys in the NFL. Usually those guys that lack production usually don't work out, at least as far as where they're taken in the draft historically. He could be one of those guys that ends up working out like a Danielle Hunter, but generally they don't. I personally would rather take Pierce here just because Pierce has production. I think he can come in and already produce. So I would, but again, I recognize the upside and potential, and you want to take a chance at that upside, that potential with him. And like Anthony said too, he's already a really good run defender. You already got that going for him. So I get that part of it. I just wouldn't take him at 9 personally.
And then Brian, Will Campbell went at 10 to the Bears. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it's a little surprising. I don't know if he's really how do I put it? Like a Chicago type of guy, the type of guy that they tend to draft. I feel like Banks is kind of more their type, because Banks is probably gonna have like longer arms. He's gonna have more of that athletic upside, and I think the Bears will probably latch onto that more than Campbell. I love Campbell. I've still kind of come around to the idea of him ending up as a guard in the NFL. But I think if you take him, you give him a chance to be a tackle, and then let him, as they say, fail outside or fail inside, however the saying goes. You know what I mean? Start off outside and then move inside if he doesn't work out at the outside. Because again, like I said, I really like him. He's a guy who's going to come in with a really high floor. Just the upside's not huge, and I think he could end up moving inside the guard because of arm length and stuff. But I think like a guy like Banks or even Simmons or something like that would probably be a better pick for Chicago. They would probably make a little bit more sense for Chicago and how they tend to run their offense.
Okay, and then Anthony, so Will Campbell went to 10 to Chicago and Armand Membu went 11 to San Francisco. What do you think about those two guys?
Yes, so Campbell at 10, I just think this is too high for him in general. He's sort of the opposite conversation that Shamar Stewart is, because I think he what you see is what you get. He's going to come in. He is going to be a solid football player. I don't doubt that he is going to have a 10+ year career in the league. I just question what his ceiling is. I first of all, I think he's going to play inside. I don't see him sticking at tackle long term. And even as a guard, are we expecting him to be the Zach Martin who just retired, or the Quentin Nelson, not in terms of like play style, but just in terms of that kind of success and multiple all pros and like that kind of career? I'm not there with him. Like, again, solid starter, but when you're taking who I think is a guard in the top 10, you need him to be that kind of special Zach Martin, Quentin Nelson type, and I don't see it with him. Going to Membu for the Niners, I like it a lot. It's high for me for Membu. I want to say he's like 30 something. But I think it fills a need. I think he fits San Francisco well in their offense. I've been torn if I do think Membu will be a right tackle, but I can also see the world where he does wind up kicking inside, which I think kind of just works. San Francisco can kind of just use whatever they need from him for their offensive line. But I don't think it's exactly the pick I would make. I probably would have gone one of these defensive tackles, or maybe even like a Banks if you wanted him to be like your Trent Williams heir apparent down the road. But I don't mind the Membu pick. I think it's a solid choice.
Okay. So the next two picks were T-Mac to Dallas and Jalen Walker to Miami. So Brian, what do you think about that, as well as like, do you have Membu high enough to go? And then what do you think of T-Mac and Jalen Walker?
Yeah, actually, I love Membu. He's one of these. He's a guy, like, again, I liked even going back to 2023 film. I liked his 2023 film back last year. He's even got better this year, of course. Weird thing about Membu was he was listed by Missouri at 6'3", but he came at the Senior Bowl at 6'3" and 6'8", so almost 6'4". So usually you don't see that. Usually it's the other way around. Usually they're listed at like 6'5", and they come in as like 6'3". But anyway, so yeah, I like Membu. I would probably take Simmons before him, even coming off the injury. I would take Simmons because I think he's more of a true left tackle, where Membu's probably going to stay on the right side or possibly move into guard. But as far as McMillan, of course, like I said earlier, he's a lot lower on my board, so I wouldn't take him here at 12. I don't know if he moves the needle that much for me for Dallas. They do need a guy to go opposite. I mean, they only have basically what's his name right now?
CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, CeeDee Lamb. Yeah, Lamb, CeeDee. So that's basically it. So that he needs a teammate and he needs someone on the other side. But I mean, maybe in like a trade down, or maybe he won't slip the second round, but the second round or something like that, or a trade down, I think McMillan would make sense. At 12, I don't think he makes sense. I think if Gene T was there, he would make sense, but obviously Gene T's gone. I don't know where they would go there, because there's maybe Grant. I know some Cowboy fans wouldn't like that because that's another Michigan guy, but maybe Kenneth Grant would make sense there. I think, yeah, that's probably what I would do. I'd probably go with Kenneth Grant there, even though, again, I don't really love Kenneth Grant either, but I think Kenneth Grant would probably make more sense.
And then Jalen Walker to Miami.
Yeah, Walker. I guess that's okay. I see him more like a linebacker. It looks like that's what Kyle Crabb sees him as, more like a linebacker. It's that question his ability to rush the passer consistently like that, as far as playing edge. But yeah, I guess it makes sense. I'm not super knowledgeable on Miami as far as their roster and their needs and stuff. But as far as like value and ranking and stuff like that, that's fine. It makes sense. Again, I mean, Tyler Warren's out there, but I think they're set at tight end.
No, that would be a popular, like, Miami passing on Tyler Warren to me would be a surprise.
Okay, well, I thought they were set at tight end, but
they need tight end, offensive line, defensive line, and they need offensive line almost as bad as the Patriots, at least according to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's some better well, I don't know if I would say better options, but there's other options I think that might make more sense as far as positional value, if that's how you see it. I mean, Simmons is obviously still there. I I would probably take Simmons before Membu, so maybe even Membu would be there. Tyler Warren, like we said. So any of those guys kind of makes sense. Even Jalen Walker kind of makes sense. So it's like there's like a group of like I think 3 guys that kind of make sense there. I would probably take Walker, or I'm sorry, I would probably take Warren or Simmons if that's how the board filled. If they were available, I would probably take them before Walker, but I think it's still okay.
Okay, so Anthony, Tyler Warren went to the Colts and Kenneth Grant went to the Falcons. So what do you think of those 2 picks as far as where those players are in your board?
Yeah, I think the Tyler Warren pick is an easy slam dunk. It fits on my board. He's at 13. So this is, solid value. Fills a big need. I think he's everything the Colts could want in a weapon for Anthony Richardson. It's sometimes the easy pick is the right pick. I think this is a prime example of that. No issue here, and I'm sure Colts fans would be very happy with that. Kenneth Grant, I mentioned before, I think is being largely underrated. I think there are certainly people who are buying in. But Kenneth Grant is just such a difference maker and such a specimen for a guy his size, 6'3", 339, and is able to athletically keep up with, his former running mate Mason Graham and other, really, really talented 1 and 3 techs that we see in this class. At the combine next week, I will not be surprised in the slightest if we come out of it and say that Kenneth Grant was like the guy or one of the guys at the combine in terms of how he tests. And he's 14 on my board. So this again, lines up value-wise. Atlanta certainly needs defensive line help. They could have gone edge or interior, and I think it makes sense. Edge is probably a bigger need, to be fair. And if this was James Pierce, I would have honestly, I probably would have taken James Pierce, but I have no problem with this being Kenneth Grant. I would be I'd be pretty happy with both of these picks.
And one thing I'll add on Kenneth Grant. So if you watch Kyle Krabs and you watch Locked On Scouting, when they did takes on takes, a certain somebody in this podcast submitted the take that Kenneth Grant is going in the top 10. And Kyle Krabs said, yeah, I'm buying that because in the next mock, he's going to have Kenneth Grant going 10 to Chicago. So Kyle sees Grant moving up the board too. Like, and Anthony, similar to what you and I said, like, nobody should let Kenneth Grant fall to Buffalo. Right?
Oh, yeah. No, if he gets to 30 or even if he gets outside the top 25, I think that's a league-wide miss in my except for whoever takes him. But I think he's just even. And again, I get the argument too. Like, this is a very talented D tackle class, and so I understand from that perspective trying to find other players that are at positions that aren't as deep or as strong going forward. I get that, but there comes a point where you just have to take the talent, and Kenneth Grant is the talent, in my opinion.
Yep. He's the only player I want Brandon Beane to trade up for. Right? Brandon Beane has a habit of trading up. He's the only one to go up and get.
I wouldn't be mad at that. And I normally hate trading up too, but yeah, I wouldn't hate it.
So Brian, Kelvin Banks to Arizona, and then James Pierce to the Bengals. Is that about where those guys are on your board?
Yeah, I mean, Pierce is a little bit higher, like I said earlier about him going higher. Pierce is a little bit higher on my board. He's probably like 12-ish, 10-ish around there. So not too far off, but a little bit off. But Banks, Arizona, I guess I'll give a bookend to Paris Campbell or whatever that they just took. last year, so I guess that kind of makes sense. You probably put Banks at right tackle, which I think is okay. Again, I think they could take Pierce there too, because I think they're not really their edge rushers aren't that great either. So either pick would make sense for Arizona, really. And then Pierce to the Bengals, I mean, makes sense because that one guy, I forget his name. There's a contract dispute there anyway, and then I think they don't have really much other than him. So I think that pick makes sense too if he were to slip there. Like I said, I'm higher on Pierce than they are, but those picks would make sense.
Okay, and then Anthony, the next two were Gray Zabel to Seattle and Jihad Campbell to the Buccaneers.
Yeah, Gray Zabel this is probably the first really reach pick for me. Zabel's 49 on my board, and I've seen people even have him lower than I do. I get it from position standpoint. It feels like every single year the Seahawks need offensive line, especially on the interior. I think Zabel brings he has that sort of Graham Barton-esque kind of multi-positional, could he play a guard? Could he play center? He has that. I don't think he's quite the athlete that Graham Barton was. And I think people kind of forget that when they make that comp. So this is not a pick I'd make. I think there's also several offensive linemen available right now, notably Josh Simmons, who I understand falling for medical reasons, another one that we just don't know what he's dealing with and what teams would be dealing with. But I can't really love. I think Zabel would go. I don't know what number Seahawks have the second round pick, but whatever that pick is, if they took Zabel, love it. 18 feels high. On the other side, Jihad Campbell is just so fun to watch, dude. He is so big, but explosive and fast, but powerful. For me, he checks every box for a difference-making 3-down linebacker. He also gives you some edge upside. It's certainly him and Jalen Walker kind of feel like a similar vibe in terms of that. I think they are different. Like Jihad is just bigger and more powerful, I think, than just Walker is. But it's that sort of, hybrid kind of defender wherever he would be. In this case, Tampa, which I think is a very good spot for him to kind of be that hybrid role with Todd Bowles, former Jet legend. But yeah, Jihad, for what it's worth, is 11 on my board. So this is even a quote unquote, steal for Tampa.
So when he dropped around 2 yesterday, you probably were mildly surprised.
I thought that was insane. I genuinely, because Atlanta in the mock yesterday, Atlanta wound up with Mike Green at 15. Who I guess would be a little higher than I would have taken him still, but closer to where I have him. And then, wound up with Jihad Campbell at 40, whatever the number was. But yeah, if Atlanta walked out of the draft with Mike Green and Jihad Campbell, and honestly, those were their only picks. That could literally be their only picks. And I would tell you that they had an A+ draft like that. Yeah. Instantly, that defense would go from a struggle bus last year to potentially easily top 10, in my opinion. But here in Tampa too should be very excited to get Jihad Campbell.
So Brian, the next two were Colston Loveland to Denver and Luther Burden to Pittsburgh. So how are those guys on your board relative to where they were picked here?
Yeah, just one quick note on Zabel. I think this. Just wanted to get this out there because this seems to happen every year. Is that there's a player that went to a small school or something like that? Where I mean, North Dakota State's not really that small as far as in the draft circles, but a guy that goes to a small school that major media people, major media draft industrial complex people don't really talk about or know about or very high on or whatever, goes to the Senior Bowl, has really good Senior Bowl, and they completely blow him up way higher than he needs to go. Like it's like an overcorrection type of thing. So I think he's that guy that just got an overcorrection from these guys. Like I kind of agree with Anthony. The physical upside's not there. Not that he's a bad athlete, but he's not like he's not going to test super athletic. He's not, his arm length's not that great. Again, he played really well as interior offensive lineman. His floor is really high. Just the ceiling's not super high. He could play guard, he could play center, whatever. But I think there's other players like Tyler Booker or Jackson from Ohio State that will make more sense. I think that's just, like I said, this is just Krabs kind of overcorrecting. And just one interesting funny note, they have him listed as having gone to Penn State, which is kind of funny. But
they could have used him.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah, I got the board here on my side. But anyway, back to Loveland, Denver. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, I think that's around where I have him, around that 20-ish range. In this draft class, as far as round one grades, after I haven't completely finished my round one grades as far as how many players have round one grades, but it's going to be around 15-ish, so 15, 16. So it's like this. I mean, you're picking this late, you're get drafting guys like second round grades. So, but yeah, Loveland kind of makes sense. I mean, they could take a. What else do they need? They need. They could have taken an interior defensive lineman maybe, but Colston Loveland I think makes sense. That's fine. I think they don't really have much at tight end right now anyway. Burden at Pittsburgh. Yeah, I think that's a good pick. I mean, I think he'd definitely be a compliment to Pickens. Although I've heard some rumors that Pickens wants out or they want to possibly trade him or whatever, but I haven't seen anything concrete on that. But yeah, I think he'd be a good pick. He's actually my wide receiver one, although obviously we've talked about before is on a great wide receiver class. But so I think he might. I mean, from my board, he would probably go a little bit higher, but yeah, I think he'd be a great compliment to Pickens. He'd give that explosiveness. He can play the slot. He can do all kinds of different things. You can gadget stuff. You can probably even hand the ball off in the backfield and stuff like that. So yeah, I think he'd be a really good compliment to Pickens. To Pickens.
And then Anthony, Matthew Golden to the Chargers went next. So how high do you have Golden on your board?
So Golden for me is, where is he? 45. So this is another little bit of a reach for me, but I get it. I think my biggest issue with this pick isn't even the player. It just doesn't feel like the pick that the Chargers would want to make here. I think you have, we've only seen one running back go in Jainty. So I think Omarion Hampton is a conversation here. There are still very good defensive tackles available. There's potentially interior offensive linemen that if you want to fortify even more next to Slater and Alt, you could do that. I like Golden. And Kyle talks about it in the article. He does fit well with McConkey and Quentin Johnston, sort of bringing a different skill set. So I get it from there. And I'm not even saying this is a bad pick. I think there's other directions that the Chargers would want to go. I really think defense needs to probably be the pick here. There's just, again, too good defensive tackles that they could use, and taking Golden here when you can probably get a pretty decent wide receiver in the next round or in the third round. I don't know if I love this for the Chargers.
Okay, so Brian, the next pick is to the Packers.
Yeah,
what was small pile grabs about Michael Williams to the Packers?
Yeah, it's It seems like this has kind of been what do you call it? A little bit more of a popular pick lately with the major big meaty people. It's just like Michael Williams there, just like, oh, he's the athletic upside pass rusher, whatever, blah blah blah. Their pass rush was great this past year, but I don't know. I just don't think it makes sense. I mean, they already have, although they're somewhat different players, they already have a similar player in LVN who still hasn't developed. I don't see the point in grabbing another quote unquote LVN type of player where this big, huge, strong guy who's fast and explosive, but not really all that bendy, but still needs a lot of work and his pass rush plan and all that stuff. And he's kind of rock coming in. He's going to be a 1 to 2 year project type of thing. It doesn't make sense to me. Plus, I mean, you already have Gary. LVN's probably going to start next year. I mean, you're going to take Michael Williams. He's going to be your third pass rusher for the next 3 or 4 years. It doesn't make sense as far as roster construction, at least to me, and at least generally how Green Bay approaches things. I think probably either a corner or a defensive tackle would make more sense. I mean, you have Harmon out there, you have Tyleik Williams out there still, and then also the different corners.
What corners would you take here based upon your board?
Who would I take, or who I think Green Bay would take?
Give both.
Oh, okay.
So if you think there's two different categories based upon your board and how you see Green Bay drafting based on their thresholds,
right?
That's why we mock the mock. So go for it.
Yeah. Me personally, I do love Hairston, even though he came in a bit light at the Senior Bowl. But I mean, he's too light for Green Bay, likely. He was 180. I don't know. I don't think he can put on 15 pounds by the combine. Plus, they probably would look at that as, he's probably not going to be able to maintain the weight. But I think Azariah Thomas would make sense. They like him in the first round. They like younger guys with athletic upside, talent, all that stuff. So, like I said, Azariah Thomas would make sense. Trey Amos would probably make sense if they did like a trade down, since he's a little bit of an older guy. They usually don't like to take older guys in the first round. Outside of Devontae Wyatt was the only guy that was over 22 that they have taken the first round since Goody's been there. So I think Azariah Thomas would make sense. So Azariah Thomas, probably one of the defensive tackles, would probably make more sense as far as what the Packers would actually do. Because they would likely see Jahdae Barron as a nickel, and they already said nickel with Bullard. So, he's either Azariah Thomas or one of the defensive tackles, like a Derek Harmon or a Tyleik Williams.
Okay. And then, Anthony, the next two picks were Jahdae Barron to the Vikings and Emeka Egbuka to Houston. So what do you think? Where are those guys on your board? And is that about the right range for them to go?
Yeah, Barron this is about where I take him, I guess. I have him 34, but he's sort of in this tier of guys that's like late round 1, early round 2. So maybe it's a little touch early for me. And there's other corners that I probably would take over Barron here. The problem is those other corners have medical questions, which you're not going to get with Barron. Barron, it really just, for me, boils down to, can he play outside in the NFL? And I'm leaning toward no at this point. I'm not ruling it out entirely, but I just think between the height and I don't think he's incredibly athletic, I guess. He's very smart, very, very instinctive in coverage. And I think he moves well. But I don't know if he can be that true island lockdown CB1 that the Vikings are looking for. And Egbuka to the Texans. I like Egbuka a lot. Egbuka is 20. Where is he? He's 18 on my board. So this is about, again, where I would take him. Receiver's a need for Houston, but you still have, Tyler Booker, right, is still on the board. Donovan
Simmons.
Jackson is still on the board. Who else here? A lot of several offensive linemen are still on the board. Connerly is still on the board. Ursary. So, not taking an offensive lineman after what we saw Houston deal with last year, trying to protect CJ Stroud, is like borderline blasphemy. Again, I'm not wide receiver is a need. I acknowledge that, but you have so many good offensive linemen available right now that have fallen to you by way of just, I guess sending Gray Zabel to Seattle. So yeah, I think I love Egbuka. He's a great player, and you hope that they get Tank Dell back from his injuries so that Nico Collins and Egbuka could form this 3-person monster that Diggs didn't really quite give them. So I get it from that standpoint, but I wouldn't pass on an offensive lineman if I'm Houston here.
And Brian, Josh Simmons to the Rams and Josh Connerly to the Ravens. So where are those guys on your board?
Yeah, like I said, since we obviously don't work for NFL teams, so we don't have all their medicals. But health, not including his health. Simmons is a lot higher on my board. He's my tackle 1 right now. So if he's healthy, he's again, like I said, my tackle 1. And if he's healthy, I think everything checks out. I think he's the top 10-ish pick. So that's obviously a huge drop and a huge steal. But as far as this mock draft goes, like I said, it's a fit definitely because their left tackle is a free agent, and he's just kind of I can't think of his name right now at the moment, but I remember he went to Iowa. But I remember he was just kind of okay, or slightly more than okay, like a little bit of an average type of thing. So I think him and Simmons would be obviously an upgrade, at least long term. So I think that's a good pick for them. And then Connerly to Baltimore. I guess. I guess he doesn't. I don't know. To me, he doesn't really fit the type of offensive lineman they like. They usually like guys who are a bit more stout, bigger, better run blockers and stuff like that. So I don't know if he's a great fit for Baltimore, but I think as positional value, he's a good pickup. I think he's a little bit higher on my board. He's like in the mid-20s, or not mid-20s, early 20s. So I think it's a good pick as far as where I value him and where he's on my board and stuff like that. I just don't know if he's a great fit, like I said, with how their offense is and how they like to run their offense. But they do need an offensive tackle, so I it's okay, I guess. Makes some sense, I guess. I don't know. I guess that's okay. I don't know what else to say on it other than like I said,
all right. So Anthony,
it's kind of weird fit. Sorry, that's what I should say. Sorry. Go ahead.
Anthony, Tyler Booker to Detroit and Nick Scourton to the Commanders.
Yeah, Booker is a pretty close to a home run here. He's 16 on my board, so getting him at 28 is great value. He fills probably their biggest need, interior offensive line. I guess edge is in the conversation too, but I think Booker's a fantastic pick. Probably should have gone like 10 picks ago. Probably should have gone to Seattle. But the great pick for Detroit, and I think he's an immediate starter with like if he's a Pro Bowl rookie year, I wouldn't really be surprised. Scourton to the Commanders is interesting. In terms of my board, he's 58, which is probably lower than consensus if I had to guess. I think if you're drafting Nick Scourton from 2023, this is a steal and a home run pick. But based on what I saw in 2024, this is a reach. He put on weight, which I don't think he put on weight because he wanted, he was lazy. I think he put it on because the coaches told him to. That's how it felt, but it didn't make him. It made him worse. He lost a lot of explosiveness, I think. He's still very strong. I think still very good with his hands. But a lot of the blend of athleticism that he had when he was at Purdue just did not show up for me when I watched him. That said, I like the fit with Dan Quinn in Washington. That in that sense, I think this is a solid place for him. And if he gets to the league, he drops that 10, 15 pounds that he put on before the season and can get back to the Purdue Nick Scorton. This is an awesome pick. But as it stands, there are multiple edge players I would have preferred in this spot if edge is even the pick. I think wide receiver is also a conversation here, but Scorton's not my favorite.
Okay, I'm about to hop on a soapbox. The next pick was Siobhan Revell, Buffalo. No. So I like the player, and Buffalo has a need at corner. The primary thing is that Buffalo tends to get better corners late in the draft than just about any other position. Levi Wallace, Taron Johnson, Dane Jackson, Jamarcus Ingram are all either day 3 picks or UDFA that Buffalo gets a lot of snaps out of historically. And hopefully I've already mentioned Christian Benford. Right. Like, okay. So if Buffalo's taking a corner high, he better be an all-pro. Like, he literally needs to be a game changer. Like, let's not draft a guy because he's going to be a starter. Let's draft a guy because he's going to be a game changer. So with where the roster is, Derek Harmon is still available. So that's got to be one. Tyleek Williams is available. That's got to be another one. The 4 wide receivers that I would consider are all off the board, so I recognize that. But then the next pick was Malachi Starks to the Chiefs. Like, Buffalo needs a safety. I realize, like, Starks is he probably a slot corner more than a safety, or would you guys put him on the back line?
On the back, the safety.
Yeah. I mean, I think he can play slot corner. Like, he gives you that option. But no, he's primarily a safety for me too.
Yeah. I think you could even in certain packages even put him at like outside corner. I think he's that athletic.
Yeah.
And I like the positional flexibility with Starks, especially because Taron Johnson, like, he's an all-pro slot corner. But do we have Taron Johnson for 2 more seasons? Right, so I would love to have Starks on the roster, and if he starts at safety and you move him to slot or something like that, like you need somebody to backfill Johnson. And then even Walter Nolan went 2 picks later. I've already named 3 defensive tackles. I've already named at least 1 other safety. I would have considered Xavier Watts over Revell here. Like, there's a lot of players I would have liked. So that's my soapbox. So, Brian, the next player was Malachi Starks to the Chiefs. So where do you have Starks on your board?
A lot higher. Safety 1, of course, in the class. He's been safety 1 from the summer. Maybe I shouldn't say a lot higher, but he's definitely he's higher. He's like in the probably 20s, early 20s. Like we kind of just mentioned, he's a safety for sure. He's a free safety, post safety, whatever you want to call him. But he can play all over. He can play in the box. He can play in the slot. Like I said, he's quick at his. You see at times him covering guys, and he looks like almost like a cornerback in his movement skills. So you probably could even play him some on the outside as outside corner at times in certain packages and whatever. Because he can do it all. I'm not saying he's as good, but he's got some Ed Reed vibes to him, like as far as like his skill set and things he can do and how high of a level he can do him at that. I'm not saying he's gonna be all pro. I mean, of course, there's always potential he could end up being it, but I think he's got a similar skill set and like even although he's a little bit bigger, even like similar somewhat size because Ed Reed was not the biggest guy. Ed Reed was like 5'11", 200 pounds. Malachi is like 6'1", 200, 205, something like that. So he's not even a huge guy. But he's physically strong, good run defender. So it's a great pick for Kansas City. It's a steal. You put him back there with Jaden Hicks, who had a decent year as a rookie, and you have your safety set for the next 10 years. So just Kansas City doing Kansas City things, getting guys, really good players at the end of the first round.
Yeah, so speaking of another team that's doing things, so Walter Nolan somehow falls to Philadelphia at pick 32. So Anthony, where's Nolan on your board?
Yeah, Walter Nolan's 17. This pick is ridiculous just in terms of how we let this happen. But yeah, Walter Nolan is a just menace on the inside. So powerful as a 3 tech for Ole Miss, and you put him next to Jalen Carter, and Jesus Christ, yeah, I don't know. Not to reinvigorate your soapbox, Jim, but if the choice is Walter Nolan or Savon Ravel for Buffalo, who, and by the way, I'm also a Savon Ravel fan. I don't want to make it sound like I don't like him, but if that's my choice, it's Walter Nolan pretty easily. I know there's questions about effort and consistency. Me, just personally, from what I saw, I didn't see those issues, that much more egregiously than we've seen other guys sort of, take off a play maybe or something like that. So it's not a huge concern for me unless we get other information. But yeah, Walter Nolan being 32 is a great pick for Philly, and I think also summarizes that we're going to see a lot of players go later than they probably should go, just in terms of their talent level. But because of the way that this draft kind of just is, a lot of talented players are going to fall to either late round 1, like we're seeing, or as we go into day 2.
Okay. So I'm going to highlight 4 different round 2 picks in his draft. So at pick 42, he had Elijah Arroyo of Miami going to the Jets. So the first question is, Brian, where's Arroyo on your board?
Sorry, what pick did you say he went at?
42.
Oh, 42. Gotcha. Okay, I was trying to scroll down. Wasn't going fast enough. It's about okay. I mean, I think he's a little bit lower on my board, like probably like 50-ish, but that's not too far off. Yeah, I mean, just my only thing with Arroyo that I'm concerned about is just I want to just see the medicals, because he basically missed all of 22 and 2023 with injuries. So as long as the medicals check out, I mean, yeah, that's fine. I mean, he's got talent, he's got upside. He can definitely be a seam stretcher and stuff like that. Especially if you're going against a team playing a lot of cover 2, you really pull that middle linebacker deep, and then you can have your wide receivers cut under and all that type of stuff. So yeah, I think it's a good pick, a good value too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know he had a good Senior Bowl, and I picked Arroyo at 32 to the Eagles in yesterday's 32 GM mock. And Bill Carroll said he had not seen Arroyo go that high. So he had Arroyo, let's say, outside of his top 64. He says he hadn't seen Arroyo go that high. So Kyle Krabs, you validated me with this. So thank you. But Anthony, what do you think of Arroyo to your Jets in the second round?
Yeah, I might need the soapbox. I'm going to be honest. No. So for what it's worth, he's actually 100 on my board, like exactly. I'm not the biggest Arroyo guy. If this pick is tight end, which I feel like you can get tight end not in the top 50 and be fine. But even if this is tight end, there's at least 3. Yeah, there's 3 other tight ends that I would want here. Most notably, Mason Taylor is the tight end I would take here if this is tight end. But there's other need. I mean, we already talked about they still haven't taken a defensive tackle, and you still have very good defensive tackles on the board right now. They haven't. I would prefer a wide receiver, but a weapon's a weapon. So I guess whatever, that's fine. But I don't think tight end at 42 is the move. Safety is a I love Xavier Watts, and Iman Wari I don't think is gone either. He's a consideration, but he's more of a hybrid kind of jack of all trades kind of player rather than a pure safety. But yeah, there's bigger fish to fry for the Jets than tight end, and Arroyo's not even my favorite tight end. So I'm good with this.
Okay, so Anthony, where is Trey Amos on your board? He went 55 to Green Bay in round 2. So where's Trey Amos?
I think that's fairly close. Why can't I find Amos? Where is he? He's 61. Yeah, so this is about the range for Trey Amos. Sorry, who took him?
To Green Bay. So Brian, what do you think of the Amos pick?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned him earlier when we were talking about the first round picks. So yeah, like I said, he's 23, so he's probably a little bit slightly further down the board than at 23 than from Green Bay. So at 55, it's a great pick, of course, especially if they took let's say they took an edge rusher early, or if they took it even a defensive tackle. It's a great pick, outside corner, long arms like they like, physical, can play, cover 1, can play cover 3, fits Jeff Hafley's defense. Would probably come in and probably start as a rookie. So yeah, it's a great pick, I think. And as far as where I have him, I think I'm a little bit higher on him, but probably 50, something like that. So not much higher. So yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, so then I'm going to highlight the 2 Buffalo picks. It was JT Tuimoloau, the edge from Ohio State at pick 56. And then Travion Henderson, the running back from Ohio State to Buffalo at pick 62. So my issue is that there was no defensive tackle, and Darius Alexander was still on the board at both picks. One of the things that Brandon Beane has said in post-draft press conferences is he wanted to draft a defensive tackle, but the board never fell to where he could draft a defensive tackle that he liked the last 2 years. We took Dwayne Carter last year, and some people were even saying that in round 3 that was a reach kind of thing. So the roster is devoid of defensive linemen on their first contract for the most part. So other than Greg Rousseau and Dwayne Carter, I believe every other defensive lineman under contract is on a second contract. So if you're doing the Howie Roseman theory, you need to draft a lot of defensive linemen. So not an issue with JT Tuimoloau, but there's still no defensive tackle yet. Right? And without a defensive tackle in the first 3 picks, I question, Kyle knows the Bills roster, right? He talks with Joe Marino about it every day. Defensive tackle, please. I even would have considered TJ Sanders in round 1. Just get a player that can take quality snaps. Our defensive tackles will play 30% of the snaps. We're not looking for somebody that's going to come in and start. You just have to be able to take 30% of the snaps as a rookie. The Travion Henderson, love the player. Buffalo's running backs, James Cook, only plays 40% of the snaps. So do you would I spend a second round pick on somebody that's only going to play 45% of the snaps? It's just not the way the offense is designed. I like the idea of adding a game-changing running back, but we already have one. And I would prefer a day 3 running back. And for example, Jaden Higgins went at pick 58, and without addressing defensive tackle or wide receiver in the first 3 picks, there was just 2 misses. It's okay to skip defensive tackle if you address wide receiver. It's okay to pick a wide receiver if you skip defensive tackle, but you can't skip both. And then we skip safety as well. So those would be my 3 top positions for Buffalo would actually be safety, defensive tackle, wide receiver. And none of those 3 got addressed. So that's part of my Buffalo soapbox for the 33rd team mock. But that being said, I have tremendous respect for 33rd team. So I don't want anybody to take this as we're complaining about 33rd team. It's just a mock the mock exercise. So Kyle, if you ever hear this, I watch you every day. I have a lot of respect for what you do, but that was just for me for Buffalo. This one was just like 3 swings and 3 misses. So, but that being said, we've had 33rd team people on our podcast before. It will not be the last time that happens. So this is not like an anti-33rd team podcast. I would just like to make that really, really clear. Is there any other portion of this mock that you guys want to talk about? Like, I haven't necessarily gone through to look at, let's say, all of the trends in it. But maybe were any names missing that you thought might be worth mentioning?
I'm not, they're not missing because they're both taken, but I do think Caleb Johnson over Omarion Hampton is kind of wild to me. I think Omarion Hampton, if Omarion Hampton went, so in this mock draft, he went 54 to the Chargers. I talked about it. If the Chargers took him at 20, whatever they were, 22, I wouldn't hate that pick. So getting him at 54 is a steal. But Denver taking Caleb Johnson before him kind of feels like a miss. And they need a running back, but I don't know. Caleb Johnson is just one of those guys. I don't really get the first round hype. I think he's got a great combination of size and speed. He just isn't that much of like a creator and a guy who can make something out of nothing in the way that, a Hampton is, or Jainty is to just a whole other level. But, even like Trevion Henderson, who is obviously smaller than Caleb Johnson is, but Trevion Henderson to me is just so explosive and so much of a home run hitter that I'm willing to, I would take him, in the top 50. Caleb Johnson, I think I feel like he benefited a lot from a good offensive line, and, he's able to burst through holes that open up, but if he goes to a team where the holes don't open up, is he going to be as productive as he was? I'm not sure. So Caleb Johnson over Omarion Hampton to me was one that I questioned.
And Brian, anything on this mock that stands out to you?
Yeah, kind of it goes back to something I said earlier, was the Senior Bowl overcorrection that you see sometimes, like these major draft people. Is the Jack Bech to New England at 38. I think it's a bit of a reach. I like Bech. I've liked him for a couple of years or whatever, but he doesn't separate great. He's probably likely going to be like a power slot Cooper Kupp type of player in the NFL. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Cooper Kupp, but just he's going to see most of the time in the slot. He'll play outside, of course, too, just because of his size and his ability to just a catch situation and stuff like that. But like I said, he's not a great separator. His deep speed's kind of okay. He can stack some guys as far as being a good route runner and stuff like that, but just he's not really a big separator. Just as far as in the route and then after the route, as far as getting yak, he's not really a big yak guy either. So again, I think it's kind of like because he played well, he had a good Senior Bowl, so it's a little bit of a Senior Bowl overcorrection. To me, he's more of a third round guy. But yeah, I think that's a bit of a reach there.
Cool. So we are going to close this podcast down. We've been going for almost 90 minutes. So on behalf of Anthony, Brian, myself, the other 39 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you for watching this Saturday morning Mock the Mock episode, and we will see you on a podcast again on Monday. Thank you, everybody.
See you.